Clay, this episode, Doctor's Orders, got me thinking about sleep, because there's a lot of sleep going on in the episode. A lot of people conked out on their beds in awkward sleeping positions. Did you have... I was just thinking about the how my sleep patterns have changed, and how like sleep is just so unconstant as something in your life. When I was a kid, my parents used to always kick down the door screaming at me to get up after like 9 o'clock. And I was always infuriated by that. I was always like, why can't they let me sleep? Then I went to college and wasted my life sleeping until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon occasionally.
Oof. Yeah.
And then I'm now a parent, and I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the kids are up at that time, and I can't wait until they start sleeping in, and I kick down their door and say, get the fuck up. It's time to start doing stuff.
Well, you just got to put a lock on the door that locks from the outside.
Yeah.
Solve all your problems.
Just shake the handle, shake the doorknob angrily. But it's remarkably inconsistent and stuff like that. I guess that's all I really have to say about it. But I don't know if you have any sleep insights or any greatest time of your life where you were sleeping the exact right amount or anything like that.
No, my sleep patterns have been fairly similar for most of my life, aside from college when I had to get up for early class. I'm very much a night owl for whatever reason. I just prefer the nighttime more than the daytime, and I'm terrible getting up early. And I've never been able to switch. Like, I've tried many times to switch and get up at a quote unquote reasonable time, but it never works. So I'm consistently going to bed at 3 and getting up at like 10, I think is usually what it is. It's usually a solid 7. But
do you sleep through the night?
Oh yeah, no problem.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I've never had a problem with that.
I have a friend who is an extreme night owl, and I shared a room with him in college. He would get up constantly throughout the night. And I think it's like I was almost like seeking medical help for him because of how obnoxious it was. But it's like he goes to bed extremely late, wakes up all the time, and has like, I never really understand people who tell me they have trouble sleeping outside of like if they're going through an extremely difficult time or something, But like like if you're stressed, it's one thing. But people who just are like, yeah, I can't fall asleep, so I went downstairs and watched a movie or something like that. That is completely not anything that I've ever done in my life. Once I'm asleep until the morning comes, unless a kid comes in or something like that. But
yeah, I've developed the one thing that has changed is as I've gotten older, it's for whatever reason become more difficult for me to get back to sleep. So I used to be able to fall asleep anywhere at the drop of a hat, whenever I felt like taking a nap or whatever. But now if I like last weekend, actually, I fell asleep on the couch watching TV, and then I woke up at 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock. I think I probably fell asleep around 1. And then
in the afternoon?
No, at night.
Oh, at night, okay.
So I fell asleep watching TV at around like 1 in the morning, and then I got up and, brushed my teeth to go to sleep. And then I just could not fall back asleep. And I laid tossing and turning for about an hour, and then I just got up and played Mad Max for like 3 hours until about 9 o'clock. And then when I went back and I went to sleep till about noon.
Yep.
So it's like, for some reason, if I wake up, then it's a total crapshoot whether or not I get back to sleep. But once I'm asleep, it's like I'm good.
The episode is called Doctor's Orders. We're going to take a break. We'll play a clip from it.
Riveting episode, as you can probably surmise based on the pre-show conversation we are having.
That was a lack of preparation on my part. I usually have a note about something to talk about. I have a lot to say about Doctor's Orders, so let's take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode, and then we'll come back and we'll break it down.
The cities are quite crowded, by choice, not by necessity. The atmosphere is vibrant, communal.
It sounds fascinating.
What I'm saying is that we're a sociable people. Being alone on Enterprise, just the two of us, has proven more stressful than I imagined. 2 people aren't even enough for a Denobulan marriage, a proper one anyway.
Doctor's Orders is the 16th episode of the 3rd season. Of Star Trek Enterprise. Came out on February 18th, 2004. It is 17 of 28 in the Xindi Crisis arc. It is, I've never said this before, this is the 696th piece of Star Trek produced out of 801, written by Chris Black.
That's such a random number. That's like the Simpsons 314th episode spectacular or whatever it was.
At least that's pi. You can go with that. This is 17 out of 28 in the Xindi Crisis, written by Chris Black, directed by Roxanne Dawson. In Universe State, specifically not known. It's 2154. In this episode, in order to traverse a trans-dimensional disturbance safely, that's a sentence, Phlox must put the rest of the crew in stasis and pilot Enterprise himself. Interested to see what you had to say about this one. I felt great. How do I describe what I felt about this episode? I felt that this episode had so much potential, and I was so let down by it by the end, I guess, that it kind of evened out into an average episode for me. But I guess a good way to start this is that I think the fundamental flaw of Doctor's Orders is a problem that we've had with Enterprise for a long time, is that it's an episode that's not really about anything. And Enterprise tends to not really do anything about things. But at the same time, it also doesn't play really fair and true with a hard sci-fi concept at the same time. So it ends up in this weird wishy-washy space where I wish they had gone either direction and it would have been better, but they went right down the middle and the episode ended up right down the middle.
Yeah. I didn't particularly care for this. I think for a lot of the reasons that you're saying, I found it pretty boring. It seemed like it could be an interesting setup, but they didn't really do anything interesting with it. And I could see all the turns coming a mile away. And every turn that they gave you, though, was just a complete fabrication.
Yes.
There was it wasn't born of any story that was being told. It was just a total, we need to throw a wrench into the mix here. Let's just make something up. Like whether it's...
well, let's start at the beginning with this one, right? Like,
sure.
I was wondering if I needed to watch this episode again because I felt the same, that I was going like, all these twists are not being earned that they're giving me. So it's annoying me. For instance, I think it starts at the start with, T'Pol is never mentioned that she's going to be staying awake with him, right? Before he sees her in the ship?
I don't think so.
That drove me bananas because as soon as she shows up and he has not mentioned her, I go, oh, she's a fabrication at this point. You know, like there's they didn't lay any kind of tricky groundwork to make you go like, yeah, it's normal that T'Pol would be walking around at this point, and to maybe slowly ease you into thinking that things are weird with her or something like that. It's just, he's like, what the hell? What was that noise? What was that noise? And then T'Pol shows up and he never goes, oh, of course it was T'Pol, the other person who's awake on this ship with me currently. You know, it just, it had weird moments like that where I think it betrayed itself in some ways. It was like trying to be too clever by half, and it ended up exposing its hand because it was trying to make it seem like there was something mysterious going on.
Yeah, the T'Pol thing was kind of interesting because I actually didn't think it didn't work. I know that's a double negative, but because they do kind of give it to you as a bit of a surprise that she's also there, and it didn't super stand out to me as they were cheating or anything at that point, but then as it was going on, it's like, oh yeah, okay, she's clearly, because I think at the point where she shows up, there had been no establishing that Denobulans sometimes hallucinate or whatever.
No.
When they don't have enough friends around or whatever. So I think at least from a structural standpoint, I don't think it's beyond the pale to assume that maybe she might be real.
Even though Phlox does not bring her up at that point.
Doesn't he bring her up in the letter that he's writing to his friend?
Does he? If he does, my entire point is wrong. But when he's reacting to her being there, he's like chasing a noise, and he doesn't call T'Pol to say, "Where are you, T'Pol?" at this point, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's a little bit dirty pool, I think, because you'd think if he would call to Paul, but the reason he's not calling to Paul is because he can't, because if he does, then that gives away the twist that that gives away like the next. So it's like it's a very manufactured writerly thing. Like he's not doing something that he should be doing, because if he does that, then it ruins the plot or it ruins the moment.
The moment, the scene of the reveal, right?
Yeah, and I think that just runs through the whole episode, especially when you get to the end and you get this reveal. When you get the reveal that she is actually a hallucination, it just makes me go, then what was the point of any of this and any of the conversations that they had if there was no actual character stuff going on? It's just him talking to a figment of his imagination. I don't know.
I actually had a weird reaction to the end, because when I saw T'Pol, the minute I saw her in this thing that he has not said anything about her, I go, oh, she's fake. Then she starts acting crazy too, which they try to pass off as it's because of she's going through the cloud in the same way that he is, and it's affecting her. And I was like, I don't buy this, really. Like this doesn't seem strong enough that this is a reason that this is happening. And then at the very end, when he and T'Pol are waking people up, and he's like, and she's joining him in a walk through the hallway. There's like a minute left in the episode. And I go, oh my God, I was actually wrong about this episode. Like, she was with him. Does this change my entire perspective on this episode, that this is actually a real T'Pol and Phlox adventure? And then he goes into her room and sees her, and she disappears, and the episode ends. I was like, oh, fuck it. Nope, never mind. Like, the episode didn't even twist it at the very end on me.
After everybody wakes up, they have a scene in the mess hall together where she tells him that he did a good job and that Tripp said that he did a great job. Right. So like, I guess the other thing that I was trying to figure out based on all of this is, did any of that stuff happen at all?
It's like, unclear whether or not this happened. Because
that's the other thing that felt like an egregious writerly finger on the scale, was when all of a sudden the sensors are wrong and he has to figure out how to start the warp core. Like, if he's having a psychotic break and trying to figure out how to boost up the warp core when they don't actually have to do that.
Yeah, the atomic reactor. He's fiddling with a nuclear reactor at a scale that no one has ever conceived of before, too. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they don't, like, there's no comment on whether or not the readings that he saw were part of his hallucination or not, or whether or not anything that he did to the reactor and jump-starting everything and getting them out of the trouble they were in was real.
They do say that, because there's a line that T'Pol says Tripp has to recalibrate all the work that he had done to the engine.
But that's Ghost T'Pol.
That's before the end luncheon?
Do they not? Is the scene at the end where they talk to each other in the mess hall? Did that actually happen, or is that
actually happens, because Ghost T'Pol disappears before that happens? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my mistake then, because I thought him seeing sleeping T'Pol, I thought was the last scene. But
I'm
I guess
pretty sure. I have to check this on Memory Alpha now at this point. So, yes, the very final scene is he joins T'Pol at a table in the mess hall. So she's awake.
Never mind.
She's awake at that point.
Take back what I said about that. But okay, so that means that the engine room stuff all did actually happen.
Yeah,
so
he was in there whacking.
Were actually wrong.
He was whacking away with a hammer on this thing. Well, and I mean, but it doesn't answer, did the expanse actually get bigger? And he needed to do that. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess. Otherwise, why else did he do it?
I don't know. It's
I don't know. It's a very contrived thing, kind of from start to finish.
Well, that's what I mean about the fact that, so the episode doesn't want to do a Phlox character piece, right? It doesn't want to do a what Phlox actually thinks when he's alone and stuff like that. They kind of touch on it, but it's not really the point of the episode. They don't do what I would have really loved and was really my favorite part of this episode. I hope they did it as a genre horror exercise, because I loved all those moments in this one. What they also didn't do is, once they abandoned the character work, they didn't turn it into a firm sci-fi problem that Phlox has to fix. you know?
Right.
Like there's no how do we write a script where Phlox, the person who doesn't know what he's doing, is the only person who can do anything on this ship. They don't do that because they kind of mix it with his hallucinations and they turn it into this. Is this really happening? Like, what's the point of this? Is there even a problem in this situation? So it dodges virtually every angle I would have gone with the script, and instead settles on Phlox and T'Pol kind of freak out with each other, and we'll intersperse it with scenes of deep, like, unsettling horror. Because my favorite aspect of this episode is being alone on a ship where everyone else is asleep is terrific. I really like that idea. And
that just makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure.
And when they start doing hallucinations, I love the Hoshi in the shower scene.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Like, I love all that stuff like that. I wish they had done more of that, and they don't. And we've said before that Enterprise does creepy and horror really well. For out of all the Star Treks, it probably does them the best. It just ended up in a bad place. I don't know if you would have preferred a Phlox story, if you wanted a hard sci-fi, or if you thought the other third wheel was the better way to go. But, like, would you agree that it was just a problem of choosing a direction, or do you think it's more fundamentally broken than that as an idea for a script?
I'm not sure. Because I like, my favorite part of the episode was actually when he and T'Pol are both kind of losing it, and they both get to ham it up a little bit. And I wasn't totally buying I thought the Hoshi scene was good, but, like, yeah, it wasn't really in service of anything.
Same with the Zindi, the insectoid when he walks in.
The Zindi thing, I wasn't even sure if they have they actually visually encountered the insectoid Zindi at this point?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah.
But, like, the Hoshi scene made sense because that hallucination he was having was born of this thing they've been talking about the whole episode, where if the people wake up, they're gonna explode or something in a day or whatever.
Yeah.
So that at least was born of something from the episode, but they didn't expand. Like, yeah, it wasn't, his space madness wasn't in service of getting to know Phlox, or what Phlox's fears are, or what Phlox's reservations are, or anything like that.
Or what he brings to the crew in some ways, like what his overcoming the fear, what it reveals about him as a character.
Yeah, I think that would have been the better way to go. And I don't even know if I honestly think I probably would go that way and not go have the hard sci-fi thing that he has to get past, because ultimately, like, that kind of is the sci-fi problem at that point, is this, cloud of, I don't know, whatever shit they're flying through to get to the other side.
Pink
like
gas.
How much do you, like that probably is enough. I also think I would probably remove T'Pol. I think if it's just Phlox, then you can get a bit more of that, like, Evil Dead 2. It's just Ash in the house trying to deal with the crazy shit that's happening.
Yeah, I'd 100% remove T'Pol from the. I think T'Pol kind of kills anything that they're doing in this one.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think they're really doing much of anything. They're just kind of like doing a bunch of disparate elements that are all kind of fun in their own way, but not really of service to much as a whole.
Yeah, and in that way, I think it's a pretty stock Enterprise episode where it doesn't have it feels more like a script had to be written and had to come in, and this is what came in, instead of sort of an idea that leads to a script, is the way that I feel a lot of Enterprise things come from, whether it's a time crunch or just a production or something. They never come from a place of, I can see where the genesis of this idea came from, and the episode builds around it. It's more like you have a script where you constantly come up with different ideas as you're writing it against the clock, and you're like, I'll add this in now, and then I'll do this, and it leads to this really unsatisfying feeling at the end of it.
Yeah, I think the mistake that they make is, if T'Pol's gonna be in this, she has to be real. Yes. Because if she's not real, then any interaction that they have is meaningless in the end. Like, it's not there's no revelation from Phlox that the projection of T'Pol is him somehow talking to himself about things. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing in there. It's just a gag. And if you really, and at the end, it's not worth anything because it's not like he's like learned anything new or changed or anything by talking to Ghost T'Pol here.
Yep.
So if
I could argue he could have. Sorry, I would say that he could have learned something if he learned that T'Pol was a hallucination at the peak of his hallucinating. You know what I mean? Like
sure.
If he came to a realization that the way T'Pol is cracking up is a reflection of his own psyche, at that point, maybe you can do something. But he literally learns it right at the end of the episode when it's meaningless.
Right. And so if you want to have the two of them actually interacting with each other in the way that they're doing here, I think that she needs to be real, because then you have these two because then you've got this kind of spiritual sequel to the Ponfar episode, right? Where it's T'Pol in the sexy chamber with the glitter chamber with trying to ride out Ponfar with Phlox helping her through it.
Yeah.
And having that sort of mirror where she kind of the tables are kind of turned now, I think would have been a nice way to go, because he's always so composed that having somebody else there help him through having T'Pol there to help him through something that she can relate to, even though maybe they don't relate to each other on like a base species level or whatever. Right. I think there's more in there that's kind of interesting. And also plus, like, if she's a ghost, I was watching this go, like, before I was 100% sure, like I knew I knew there was something coming at the end. About halfway through, I'm like, she has to be a ghost. There's no other way, the reason they're playing this the way they are. But one of the things I kept saying was like, why do they keep splitting up? If she just hangs around with him, anytime he has a hallucination, she can say that's not real.
Right.
But she can't do that because she's also a hallucination, which again is a writerly construct to avoid these like common sense situations.
Yeah. It's got that horror thing of just separating. And again, if she always shows up post hallucination, which is fitting for Phlox's hallucinations. But yeah, I would agree that I think my pinnacle idea for an episode like this would be Phlox by himself. I completely understand why T'Pol is in this episode, because otherwise Phlox, they'd have to come up with a way where Phlox is talking to himself about literally everything that he's doing.
Well, I mean, they already did. I mean, he's doing that letter
composing
thing.
The letter, yeah. It would have been unbearable to have the whole thing.
Well, but he's also hallucinating crew members, so it's not like he can't have anybody to interact with. You know, he's still hallucinating Archer. He's still hallucinating Trip.
Oh, but you mean he would be recognizing that he's hallucinating? Because I like the idea of him being completely solitary while everyone else is asleep. You're saying that he would have the hallucinations and talk to those people as a get out of jail card for that?
Yeah, I think that probably makes the most sense, because if it's just him, well, in your situation, what would he be doing, I guess, for the whole episode?
That's where I'm saying that they can't do it. That's why T'Pol exists, because T'Pol adds someone for him to talk to and to kill time and create you could still have the sci-fi problem for Phlox, I suppose. Or I thought that there is a way to do it if it's an alien species that's not the Xindi get on the ship or something like that, which they've done a few times, I guess. So maybe they don't want to do that again. I guess this is all really stemming from the fact that I liked Phlox by himself being scared of the noises in the ship.
Sure,
like I wish that they had built something around that, be it some sort of alien is doing something eventually, or something goes wrong with the ship and he has to technically fix it and he's not prepared for it. Instead, they have to put T'Pol in there because they have to have them talk to get through that stuff. And I think that, like, I was even hyper aware of the fact that this Enterprise ship doesn't have a computer that people can talk to yet. It's too early for that. Right. That would be the way that it would work in a post this timeline series and stuff. I don't really have anything. I don't have an idea about how to fix it. I liked those moments, and T'Pol's obviousness to me ruined it. And I also hated Blaylock's performance in this, and it every scene she was in, I just felt was getting worse and worse. Even when they're supposed to be sharing meals and sharing like sort of bonding or something, I didn't buy any of it because I knew she was fake at that point. So it didn't mean anything, and it was kind of a letdown.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the difference in our two takes is in your version, he's not hallucinating at all.
Right.
Okay, that's the difference. Okay, yeah. I'm saying in mine, he would still be hallucinating. He would still be kind of going crazy, but it would T'Pol wouldn't be there as like a twist. It would just be more
constant. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it would be because I like the idea actually of this weird. I mean, even though it's a complete pull it out of your ass kind of story mechanic, but I kind of like this idea of that if he's not around people, he starts to go crazy because, especially after a year of being locked up in quarantine, it's not entirely unrelatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and to have that element where he is kind of losing it a bit and he is hallucinating crew members and talking to him in a way that he's afraid maybe that they think of him in real life, kind of like that kind of stuff. I think you can get a really interesting character study out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really think you need much more than, I mean, yeah, you could probably still keep the warp core thing in there if you really wanted to, if you need the third act problem for him to solve or whatever. But yeah, I think there's more story there if it's just him by himself, whether it's the way you're saying or the way that I'm saying.
Yeah, I was struck by it's we were coming off of I can't remember now, the episode that we just talked about that we liked the low stakes of, what the hell was it? Where they're just traveling. The first episode where they're just traveling somewhere. I can't remember what the episode was.
Oh yeah. Oh, the one where they sleep together.
Yeah, Harbinger. Yes,
yes.
Harbinger.
Yeah.
Have I not edited that yet? I guess not.
I don't know. Literally the last episode we did, I think.
And so hopefully I saved that.
Although that was at this point it was a week ago because we didn't do one on Friday. So.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So Harbinger, we like that one just because we talked about it was relatively low stakes. It was about getting to know the crew, and I think that your idea for Phlox works here. If it's less of a problem-driven thing and more of a reveal something about Phlox idea, I would agree that it's probably better for this series. I was struck while watching this about the sci-fi problem still feels like you have to put it into these Star Trek episodes like this. Like it's not a series or a show or a franchise that's confident enough in its character work to have 2 back-to-back episodes where a character, you learn something about the characters, It's kind of unfortunate in some ways, but you also see the skeleton of the series and how I feel that Enterprise is the most structured of the Star Trek shows we've seen so far. It feels like they have a final draft template that they hand out to all the writers and they fill the blanks in about how it works. And this felt like that was really suffering from those issues of this is how Enterprise works. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, and don't try to change it too much.
Well, they almost made a big character change and came very close to making Phlox the biggest villain in Star Trek history when he almost shoots Porthos.
Yes. T'Pol's line about you almost shot the captain's dog did make me laugh, stuff like that. I was sort of fantasizing about what if he did shoot the dog, or if the plot was just he shot the dog by accident while Archer was asleep and he had to spend the next few days thinking of an excuse to say about why that happened.
He starts growing one of those Trip clones, but it's for the dog, and then he has to euthanize the clone dog.
The clone dog to harvest its parts. I'll go back to what I did really like about this one. I thought it was genuinely creepy in some parts. The noises where he's sitting and watching the movie is a very relatable. If you've ever, I'm sure everybody's been home at night watching TV and you hear somebody, you have to turn the TV down, and that's scary enough to turn the volume of whatever you're watching down to hear what a noise is in the rest of the house. I liked him.
I wish they had him watching a horror movie.
Yeah, that would have made more sense. Although that was quite a bit of dialogue from whatever that movie was that he was watching.
Yeah, it was that was Danny Kaye. I don't know what movie it was though. It seemed to be like a Robin Hood send up or something. But he did mention The Exorcist, which I feel like has to be the most modern movie reference they've ever made on Star Trek. Like full stop.
From the 70s. Exorcist was the 70s, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because I've never heard them make references of any, well, outside of the Beastie Boys in 2009 or whatever. But before that, I've never seen them make references that specifically modern outside of, say, well, I mean, even in the ones where they go back in time, they don't really do it. I guess they did in part 4, but like in the show, anytime they make these sorts of references to movies or whatever, it's always like stuff from the 30s.
Yeah,
is like
public
as
domain.
modern as they get. Yeah.
Archer's not going to say that Phlox, this plot of yours is some risky business, just like our movie that we watched.
I wish they would do that and have somebody go, so it's like what, the year 2000 or something, have somebody say like, it's really a shame. I was going back through the video files, and man, it's really a shame what happened to Vin Diesel, don't you think?
Vin Diesel, just a cold open tease is just Vin Diesel, overrated, underrated. It's like, let's go review. I like the him looking out the window and something moves and he runs away from it that you don't see.
Wait, hold on. Is the Eugenics Wars, is that actually just the swing revival of the mid-90s?
I would think so. You got to.
Is that how reviled that period of history was at this point?
No one admits that they were a part of the Eugenics Wars. They just like, I wasn't into that. I did not buy a zoot suit or anything.
It's about genetic manipulation and giant pants.
I like the horror stuff. I liked Hoshi's scene. Amy came in like just in good timing. She came in for that Hoshi scene and legitimately frightened her. The makeup was great, and it was a good setup. It's a psycho setup, sort of, and stuff like that, but it's just kind of neat. When
it started, I thought they were going the other way with it, and this was going to be, all right, Brandon, let's put somebody in a shower. We got nothing happening on this show. Let's put Hoshi in the shower, and Phlox can get all weird with her. It'll be great. And she's a hallucination, so she can be as sexy as we want her to be.
You think Rick stormed in after John Billingsley's nude scenes, going like, "What? What kind of show are we running?
Shut it down!
Manny Cotto immediately promoted on the spot. That was it was a very Austin Powers stuff. But
I was thinking that too. Yes.
It's directed by Roxanne Dawson. Dawson continues to be a very strong visual director. She's really good in every episode. Every episode with her, just it looks like they're doing stuff that they've never done before. That being the most obvious example.
Yeah. That was. That's one of those things where I feel like if you're thinking about it, it's like, of course he's walking around naked on the ship. Right. Would you not?
Yep.
You would do it at least once just for the hell of it.
It's funny. It was well shot. It's kind of funny. It's a little bit of a ripoff. I recognize the influence and stuff like that, but it does totally make sense for Phlox of all people too. It's not like it's Archer walking around in the nude. It's the hedonist Denobulan walking around doing it.
I was eating breakfast while I was watching this, and when they did that like long pan from him getting up out of bed and like just focused on his disgusting feet, I actually had to look away from the television.
The feet makeup scene's kind of pointless. We talked about that in the Predator episode on Patreon about alien feet. Phlox would have been a good example to bring up.
Yes.
My last sort of point about this, no matter how I feel about the episode, a fairly effective cold open.
Yes.
Where he just sees the dog and then he opens the door and Archer's knocked out on the bed and Phlox does not seem concerned about it. That's a pretty good cold open. That's a good one for this show.
Yeah, I agree. It was not it wasn't the usual non sequitur kind of thing, or it had a little bit of non sequitur to it, but it was still very much of the story they were going to tell and was interesting enough to see Archer in some sort of, indisposed state, if you want to call it that.
Phlox not being concerned is the key, I think. Phlox treating it like it's normal is what sells that idea.
Yeah, but yeah, it's weird. You don't really know what's going on, so it's for one of those short cold opens that they do. Yeah, it was a pretty good one.
Anything else you have to say about this one? You generally seemed pretty mixed on it. I mean, we talked about, there's not really even any reason to talk about the plot resolution to it with the, I mean, I agree with you. I'm not sure if any of this was necessary to happen, although the ending seems to imply that he did do something with the engines. Is that was that the right outcome for that? Or would you have preferred all of this was in his head?
I would not have preferred all of it being in his head, but I think what would have been a nice addition is being unsure of whether or not it was in his head. Having Phlox himself be unsure. So if he knows he's hallucinating by the end and he's trying to reconcile it, and then the sensors start breaking and there's this thing it seems like he needs to jumpstart the warp core, for him to be legitimately unsure whether or not this is real, because if it's not, he could blow the ship up.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Which I don't think they do that at all. I think once the sensors start going off, it's pretty much like, oh, this is what we have to do, but we're not sure we can do it. I would have liked there to be more ambiguity and tension coming from whether or not this is actually something that should be done at all.
Yeah.
The usual thing when they do this stuff is like when somebody pulls a gun on somebody and it's, they're seeing it as Hans Gruber from Die Hard, but it's actually their sister or something,
Yeah. Yeah. I would have, I think ambiguity would have been good in this case. I really don't like the fact that they are sure that he tinkered with something. Him tinkering with something makes it seem to me that there was actually a problem that he needed to solve, even though I think that that's less clear that there was a real issue that he did anything, because everyone's congratulating him on the tinkering that he did or the job that he did.
Right.
So it seems like he actually had to do something. And I guess the final point, which is kind of a tie into that, we haven't really touched on it, is T'Pol. Is there any viewing of this where T'Pol represents something other than a plot mechanic to cause Phlox, to give Phlox someone to talk to and to freak out with him at the same time? Because I was honestly annoyed. Like, I knew she was fake at that time, but when Phlox starts talking about, like, how do I do the warp core reaction? She's like, I don't know. It's like, you're the Vulcan who, like, invented warp. This should be like changing the gas in your car, I would assume. So I was annoyed that they were playing the anomaly stuff, making her stupid or something. Like, she was unable to control her emotions, and therefore she also didn't know how to fix the problem that she should be able to fix. It struck me as weird. I know she's not the engineer or whatever, but she's the Vulcan science guy who got sent along with them because she knows everything about all this stuff. It was strange to me, and I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, she's also not real, so.
In the episode, or like in reality of like.
Oh, in the episode.
Okay,
I mean, like the point. She that character who's acting that way is in fact not a real manifestation. It's not a real person.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is, what's the purpose of her being there other than to annoy me through that scene? Like, does she represent something in Phlox, I guess?
I don't think she can unless you know that she does, if that makes sense. Like, I think you have to, if you're going to go that route, I think it has to be not a secret that she, or it either has to be not a secret that she's a hallucination, or you have to at least learn it earlier. So that way there's a little bit of, or have him talk about it at the end or something when he's finishing up his letter or something like that. I think it's possible, but they don't ever address it directly or indirectly. So it doesn't come off as anything more than just having fun messing with the audience.
I guess the way that I was conceiving it would be that in order for her to reflect something about him, you would think that they would have to work together to solve the problem. And then Phlox, once he realizes that she's a hallucination, or maybe before that, realizes that what he was putting onto her that helped solve the problem is something that he has within him, right? So my problem with it is that T'Pol becomes a ninny, and it doesn't show you anything about what Phlox thinks.
Right.
It just shows, like, all she does is a reflection of him being scared, which I know he's scared because the real Phlox is scared at this point. So I don't need her copying him. I need her to be some sort of, even if she acted more like normal to Paul, right? And then at the end, when it's revealed that she's a hallucination, Phlox goes, "Oh, I guess I have a little bit of Vulcan in me too, in some ways.
Sure.
Like I'm that kind of a person as well, and I'm competent and able to do things." But they don't do that. I find that to be the most egregious mistake that they made in terms of the character work that they did here.
Yeah, it's difficult to read it as anything other than just being silly with T'Pol because they don't address whether or not it is supposed to be. I mean, you don't have to spell everything out, but they don't even like attempt to suggest any of that. You know?
Yeah.
So it's difficult to criticize that they didn't do it well enough when it didn't seem like they were doing it at all.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. We'll play another clip from the episode. We'll come back, read some patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about doctor's orders.
The intermix is stable. A warp field is forming.
What's wrong?
I don't know. I followed the procedures exactly. What did I do wrong?
You need to...
What? What, Paul? Help me. Is it the particle confinement?
Perhaps you should increase it.
How do I do that?
Thank you very much for listening to the show today. We talked about doctor's orders. It's the 16th episode? We're almost done with the third season of Star Trek Enterprise. Thank you very much for listening to the show. Thank you for supporting the show. You can support
How many
the
we
show.
got left?
There are... Let me go here. In this season, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. Which is more than I thought there were, but I'm sure it'll go pretty fast. How are there 24? Are there 24 episodes in this season? This seems like a lot. I think my math is okay, but I think we have 8 episodes left. Patreon.com/Lipinski File is the best way to support the show. A couple $2 a month, you get extra stuff. We give extra podcasts. There's extra streams. There are polls to vote on what we talk about. We're covering Battlestar Galactica this month, or it's already out maybe by the time this episode comes out, once I edit Harbinger. And I guess that's it. Patreon.com/Lipinski File. And as always, we give a special thank you to our Captain Tier supporters, who I have scrolled past, and now they are back. Special thank you goes to Tarek Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Andrew Cholog, Matthew Ross, Michael Pond, Matt Cutler, Christian Pouch, Nick Sergi, Cardinal Doomsday, Grim Santos, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Vault 13 Hero, Jordan Cooper, Darth Mosk, Russell Elledge, HH28, Stefan Minton, Doug Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanchuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, Nick the Rat, Matt Houston, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Grapple John Zorn, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardue, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunters, EWNF Remixes, Captain Munchausen, James McLennan, Beal, and Jonas, Lokai, and Tuvix Must Die. Thank you very much for supporting the show. We dropped below the Voyager thing again, but I'm sure we'll be making it back by the time we get there.
Grateful bastard.
It's going to be a seesaw journey passing that $900 line that gives us a full unbridled Voyager.
More exciting than the stock market over here.
Yeah. You see that ProPublica report to date this podcast? Apparently you don't pay taxes
I did not.
On capital gains. Who would have thought? It was big news on Twitter, and everyone was wondering why ProPublica thought that it was newsworthy. But there we go.
Gotta write about something, I guess.
You don't pay taxes on capital gains. It's shocking. You don't pay taxes on your house going up in value either. So who knows? We're done with this one. Patron comments. Thank you very much to our patrons who support us and leave comments. We're going to go to the first one. Matt Ross says, Doctor's Orders, a book by Diane Duane, where McCoy is captain of the Enterprise and is later changed into Crusher, commanding the Enterprise D in the episode Descent. Here, it's another out-of-place story, more similar to Singularity in Season 2, and again, the Voyager Episode 1. I get the impression that this Terror at 20,000 feet redux shows how thin the story, the Xindi story actually is, needing another filler. T'Pol being a figment of Phlox's imagination was not a surprise to me when I first saw this originally. What is a surprise is that the warp engine instructions are 20 feet away from the controls. 3 purple clouds out of 5.
That was, I did think that was really funny when T'Pol said something like, overly technical, and he's like, your suggestion is I read the instruction manual?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was good. I like that.
And he actually does. Gives us some incredibly technical manual stuff. Colonel Doomsday says, Doctor's orders, Phlox and T'Pol are the only crew members left conscious when the Enterprise has to go through a dangerous anomaly. Another Enterprise tries to be spooky episode, which was done similarly in Voyagers 1. I want to like this episode, but watching Phlox and T'Pol bicker gets tiresome. I'm giving this an extra point because of the scene from the court jester. Oh, what scene is that? I don't know.
Oh, that must be the Danny Kaye movie.
Oh, the movie. Sure. 3 disfigured Hoshis out of 5.
You know what I might do to change this up?
What's that?
I would have.
I thought you were talking about the podcast, not the episode.
Yeah. Well, let's just take a break in the middle and just do a little bit of troubleshooting here and see how we can shake things up. I would start down the road of the hallucinations thing. But before it gets to kind of the way that they do as it is. But what I would do differently is I would have one of the crew members, quote unquote, wake up. Let's say Mayweather. And so now Phlox has to deal with the fact that there actually is a crew member who is awake during this thing, and then has to work with, and they can have their talking scenes. And the thing is that Mayweather is now awake in this thing that he's not supposed to be awake in, and so he's dying.
Right. And Phlox has to take care of him at the same time.
Yeah. So, but there is some sort of like thing that they're racing against, and he's having his hallucinations, but they also need to fix this problem. But Mayweather is also dying, and before they get to the climactic point, Mayweather actually dies.
Sure.
So then at that point, Phlox has to take the things that he's learned from this episode talking with Mayweather and use it to move past all of the mental anguish and stress of these hallucinations in order to fix the problem, only to find out that Mayweather himself was a hallucination. So
gotcha.
He's still alive. He was just sleeping the whole time. But it just gives it a little bit more like it does something interesting with the concept where it's like if somebody wakes up, they're going to die.
Right.
And so now you have this kind of back and forth, and you can actually kill him off and give him an interesting death scene and then pull it back at the end and have Phlox be like overjoyed to see Mayweather, but Mayweather's like, hey, what's going on here, Phlox? We don't talk that often because I'm not really in the show that much. Well, actually, no, we talk all the time because I'm constantly hurt. But you know what I mean? Like something like that, where instead of taking T'Pol and just doing this contrived thing to make her into like a goof because of space clouds, actually take the setup, use the setup, do something interesting, get people, or maybe Mayweather doesn't wake up on his own. Maybe Phlox wakes him up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
he needs him for some reason.
Yeah, he can't do what he has to do on his own. So he has to wake Mayweather up. He knows because they've been talking about it the whole episode, saying like every single crew member said to Phlox, "If you need me, wake me up. I'd rather die than Enterprise blow up." They mention it like 5 times.
Yep. Yeah.
So actually do that. Have Phlox, or at least make it look like that's what he's doing. Have Phlox have to wake up Mayweather, deal with this problem, but Mayweather's dying. Actually have Mayweather die. And so you can, you're playing with stuff here that has a little bit more weight to it that you can kind of get more drama out of instead of just, sitting around having lunch with T'Pol and then she starts shaking like a dog in a thunderstorm at the end.
Yeah, I like that idea because I think that it gives a good reason for it to be Phlox because it's a medical issue at that point. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a Hippocratic oath breaking going on there where if he wakes him up and then lets him die, or if he can't tend to Mayweather or something and Mayweather dies, it's a sort of violation of his oath as a doctor because he did the patient harm, right? And at the expense of the Star Trek moral of he saves the ship, but Mayweather dies. It also, as you say, it does give it a good oomph to you can have a death scene and actually call it back and reset it at that point. Yeah. And Phlox will learn something from that event. But mostly, I like it because in the nude scene with the two of them, Phlox can point at Mayweather himself and say, twins.
There's got to be a nude scene with both of them in this version.
How can we not have a Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze-esque Chippendale sketch with the two with the two of them? But I do like your idea.
Mayweather, I just needed to know, and I didn't want to just open your suit. It would be well beyond my ethics to do this while you're asleep. So I had to wake you up.
I do like your idea, though. I think that pretty much fixes everything while keeping the general idea intact. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't do something like that because of especially that scene where they have with Tripp. But you can't do it with Tripp because they literally just killed him off kinda 2 episodes ago or whatever. Yeah, I like Mayweather because he hasn't done anything, and
it's also a solid payoff of an in-joke of him constantly being hurt or possibly dead.
Yes. This will be the time that you actually have to go. A latte librarian says, doctor's orders. After a year of pandemic lockdown, I can relate to Phlox much more than I probably would have before, though I didn't try to shoot my dog, at least. 3 hallucinations out of 5.
No, you shoot somebody else's dog.
Royo says, a near-carbon copy of Voyager's 1 episode, which involved the crew in stasis, while 7 has to shepherd the ship through a dangerous patch of space while descending into madness. While not original, narrowing the story to just being about Phlox and his inner thoughts keeps the episode interesting, and thankfully, Phlox isn't denying cures to those whose genetics he doesn't seem to like this time. It's a run-of-the-mill Star Trek episode, but for Enterprise, it's well above average for the show. One thing I'm realizing in retrospect is rewatching the show is how terribly forgettable all the action schlock is. When an episode like this comes along that has no action, and there's nothing terribly wrong with the writing, I find it to be holding my attention much better. 3.5 out of 5.
That is a good point, because I feel like, I don't know if we've ever explicitly said all of that in one sentence, but I feel like we've touched on it quite a bit this season, especially.
Which part? The action trope?
The fact that the action stuff feels so stock.
Yeah,
but when they don't do that, it makes the episode stand out that much more.
It really does. It's a part of the Enterprise template. Fourth act action scene is like just written into a lot of Star Trek episodes. I feel they've been doing it much. I would just from like my memory of the first 2 seasons, it feels like they never did that. Like, I don't really remember, maybe Dear Doctor or something. I'm sure it did happen, but the first 2 episodes to me just felt like they were endless action sequences in every single episode. This season does feel different, that they haven't done that as much. They still do it, but not as much.
Yeah, it's amazing how you have to dial back on how many people that you shoot when you're flying through an area with no people.
Right, yeah. We got to find some people to shoot. They did have
That's why I didn't really like, I wasn't really into the, there's something on the ship stuff.
Sure.
Like the execution of it was fine, but I was like, fuck, I don't want Phlox running around trying to shoot a space bug or something. You know what I mean? Like I don't find that interesting. I'm much more interested in what's going on with him going crazy and stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would walk back my desire to have aliens on the ship. I was mostly saying that as he needed something to do, really. And I do prefer your Mayweather or whoever idea to it. But I wouldn't want him. It would just be another acquisition episode where the Ferengi came on in the first season and took the ship over or whatever. And I don't need to see any more of that. Cal Barrett says, Doctor's orders, wow, those dangerous areas of space have been quickly nerfed from nothing from our universe can survive inside this disturbance to Phlox and dogs are immune to its effects. I enjoy this one because it focuses on my 2 favorite characters in the show, Phlox and Porthos, but ultimately feels totally useless. Instead of being the mouthpiece of ethical issues or classic Trek enthusiasm like in episodes past, Phlox walks around lamenting how much he misses Denobulan orgies and bearing everything but his big blue dick. Hallucinations like dreams or comas should give us greater insight into the characters, but we didn't learn anything new about Phlox in this episode, and the hallucinations are supposed to be the healthy way to relieve stress for Denobulans, but they clearly do the opposite. 2.9 out of 5.
I'm a little surprised. I assume that Kyle would have really enjoyed that aspect of the show.
Nick the Rat says, my favorite part of the episode is Blaylock's faces. Do you think Philip Phlox put in his report that he was hallucinating or that he walks around naked in his office? His Kyle might knock over a beaker if he's not careful. I wonder if the expanse was actually growing or if it was all in his head. This episode really pushes the Xindi story forward, or was I just imagining that? Good stuff, 3 out of 5. And the final comment, Point Extra G says, Doctor's orders, would it have been better to not cue us off early that something was going on with T'Pol? Her sudden appearance at the beginning tips us that there's something going on, and it keeps the episode from successfully pulling a sixth sense. As it is, this is still a really great episode. Anytime they put Phlox in the limelight, he shines. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts and comments about that episode. If you guys want to leave your comments, come over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile. $2 a month, and you can leave comments, and we read them on the show. I think people, the comments have slowed down as we've moved toward the Xindi closure. I imagine they're going to pick up again once the final episodes kick in because it's all Xindi all the time. Mm-hmm. What did you think about? What are you going to give this one on our scale 1 to 5, Clay?
I don't know, because the more I think about it, the more I'm really annoyed that the only thing they did with that "if you wake up in here, you're going to die" thing is that one scene with Hoshi, which was good, but again, it wasn't really in service of anything.
No, it was just it was the best executed hallucination that he had.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm on the fence between a 2 and a 3. What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna give it a 3. I think.
Yeah.
I think you liked this one less than me. I wasn't bored during this episode. And I think its biggest failures are it doesn't achieve as much as I think that this idea can accomplish, really.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's just kind of lazy, and I don't think it's bad. I wouldn't show this to anybody, but I don't think it's critically flawed to a point where I'd give it a 2. So I'm happy. I would give it a weak 3. It's kind of a weak average episode, I guess.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with a 2.
Sure. I can see the argument for a 2 on my system anyway, where there is a flaw here that's holding it back from being competent in some ways.
Yeah, like it's not terrible. It's I think I'm taking more points off because I feel like there's a lot left on the table.
Yep.
And I hate to say this because I understand how very difficult writing anything is, let alone a television show, but it just feels kind of first drafty to me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's too bad they couldn't do a little bit stuff that was a little bit more interesting. And I mean, I don't know, because it looks great. Like Roxanne Dawson does a great job. Billingsley's good in it. The dog is great.
I thought we got a better view of the ship than in any other episode we've seen to this part. Like I saw angles of the ship that we just haven't seen. It made it feel like a place in a way that the show has not really done to this point.
Yeah. It actually, you know what it reminded me of was the beginning of, I don't know if you remember the beginning of Prometheus. That is just, it's Michael Fassbender's David going, just basically doing his rounds on the ship while everybody else is in stasis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It had that kind of feel to it, which I liked at the start, but then once, it didn't really, it just kind of went the most expected way that it could go. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that. I think it's T'Pol. That'll be my final thought of it. I think T'Pol in this was just a bad idea to do. Mm-hmm. It didn't add anything. It ruined I wouldn't have even thought this was a great twist if I didn't see it coming because I don't know what the twist serves. Like one of the patrons mentioned Sixth Sense, but the Sixth Sense twist is completely built upon what the character's been struggling with the entire episode.
Right,
this has nothing to do with anything. It's just a thing that happens.
Yeah, it's literally just another turn to put in at the end of the story, and like it's one of those things where it's like you can't not see it coming because so little actually happens with T'Pol,
right?
That like of any sort of consequence that you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop on what's going on there because something doesn't feel narratively right.
Yep.
And so it's like, well, what are the pieces at play here? Oh, she must be fake.
Thank you, patrons. Thank you, listeners. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show. This was Doctor's Orders. I give it a 3. Clay gives it a 2. Star Trek's continuing. Patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you want to support the show. all that stuff. We had some live streams up. You can check out the YouTube channel. There's some random video topics that have gone on. We had a stream the other day where we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. And that's it, I guess. Otherwise, things continue as normal. Join the Discord if you're so interested in talking to other fans of these shows and general pop culture stuff in general, because that's in there as well. I don't think there's anything else. Clay, do you have anything you want to say? Any other shows? You've got shows coming out?
We've got, at this point, I think Invisible Man will definitely be out. Invisible Man from 2020 from Rotten Horror Picture Show. We'll be working on this month on the Patreon Friday the 13th coverage. We'll have Friday the 13th Part 6 coming out.
I think Audition is actually going to be out because it's two weeks from now. Yeah, Audition came out yesterday if you're on schedule.
Audition from Rotten Horror Picture Show. We've got so at that point, Double Talk and You Scratch My Back should be out from Badass. So we got a lot of stuff going to check out.
Cool. Guys, thank you very much for listening.
Perfect time to take a really long drive and just, listen to nothing but one or both of our voices feeding you hot takes on multiple decades old media.
I thought you were going to, I don't know if that was a very subtle tie into this episode. I thought you were going to say, just put everyone to sleep in your house, pop this on.
That's too. Yeah. I mean, if you guys if anybody has kids and they need something to put them to sleep, I'm sure this would work perfectly. We both have fairly soothing voices, and I can do kind of an ASMR thing every now and then if you'd like.
Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Guys, thank you very much for listening.
Hey, kid, shut up. Go to bed. Shut up.
Go the fuck to sleep. Thank you very much for listening, guys.
Kill your parents.
We will see you next time.